Okay, let's begin looking now at Chapter 2, Integrity and Ethics. There's quite a bit of information here, and we're going to skim through this pretty quickly. Well, what is integrity? Now, I would encourage you to really understand this definition and remember it, because this question will pop up on several of your exams going forward. Integrity is an uncompromising adherence to doing what is right and proper. It is honesty, reliability, and fairness in your business practices. It's an essential element of a successful business relationship. It is as much about what to do as it is who to be. Let me back up now and say all of these things are true about integrity, and I believe that every company should have as one of its core values integrity. Integrity simply means that what you say and what you do are one and the same. I can make it even broader. Integrity in a person's life says that what you say and what you do are one and the same, not only at business but at home. It's doing the right thing. It's handling ethical issues that have questions of right and wrong about them. Okay, so there's always legal and ethical considerations. There's always conflicts of interest involved. Let me give you a brief definition of conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is anything that you're doing that could cause you to make additional money or have income or increase wealth as a result of your decision. So then, not all conflicts of interest are bad, but some conflicts of interest are, particularly if you're operating a public service of responsibility. What are the most challenging ethical issues for small businesses? Well, you can look at this pie chart here, and you can probably look at every one of these and say, I can relate to every one of those. We're going to talk about some specifics here in just a little bit. But the two or the three largest areas are in your customer-competitor relationships, in your employment and promotion decisions, and your employee obligations. So those are all areas for ethics issues to pop up. Well, what we find ourselves doing is we find ourselves juggling the interests of all kinds of stakeholder groups. Anytime I'm in business for myself, or anytime I'm managing a group of people or a project, I've got at least these 5 balls that I'm juggling all the time. And it's a difficult thing to do sometimes, but nevertheless, it's what we have to do, and it's what we have to develop the capability to do, is understand what are the interests of owners, what are the interests of customers, what are the interests of employees, what are the interests of community, what is the interest of government, particularly regulatory bodies. All of those I have to balance at one time. At the same time, I have to ask myself the question, am I acting in a way that reflects integrity? Well, let's look at a framework for integrity here. Managerial integrity has 3 components to it. You promote the owner's interest in your company, you show that you care about customers, and you value your employees. Those are all 3 very, very big areas, and sometimes they conflict with each other, but those are 3 real key areas for success if you focus on those from a managerial integrity standpoint. So what are some examples of ethical issues? And every single one of you is going to be able to relate to these things. I'm just going to hit on a couple of them very quickly. Expense reporting, is that an ethical issue? Absolutely it is. You'll find out, if you haven't found out already, that expense reporting, if you're clever enough, you can get away with a lot of things on expense report. But nevertheless, we're called to be honest in how we report our expenses. Your employers, your managers, your bosses have set up the expense reporting process so that you can report honestly and fairly. And so we need to do that as employees, as managers, as business owners. We have to present accurate reports of what we've been doing. Truth in advertising. We can go on and on about some of these. Bribing customers and rigging bids. I can give you examples of this. Pyramid schemes and bait and switch selling, all issues. One thing I want to point out here on the next to the last bullet is that the owner's ethics in a company always will be reflected in their employees. Have you ever noticed that? In a small company, if I know the owner, then I know that when I see the employees, they're going to be reflecting that owner's value system, his ethics or her ethics. Very important. And then lastly, we always know that the reporting of financial information leaves us a lot of temptation to rig the numbers. Let's look at some others here. Honest days work, fraudulent work compensation claims, theft of company property, embezzlement of funds, violation of personal ethics to make a sale. All of those are issues that you either will deal with or you have already dealt with in the business world. And so when we think about those and we think about the decisions we have to make, then the whole subject of our ethics pops up. Social responsibility is another area for ethics and integrity. As a good citizen in our community, and I believe this to be true too, as do the authors of this book, that we have an obligation to give back to our communities. The authors say this is a price of freedom to operate in a free economic system. And it often takes the form of personal contributions, time away from the job to volunteer, letting employees have time to volunteer in the contribution, contributing back to the community that you live in, making it better community to live in. Very important. So what are some of the responsibilities of small firms? This is what we're kind of focusing on in this course here. What is the environmental protection, starting at the top, consumerism, supportive education, compliance with government regs, response to community needs, all important, contributions to community organizations, obligations to your owners, to your stakeholders. All of those pile together. Sometimes they are conflicting. It's a conflicting situation if I have an obligation to shareholders to provide them a dividend in my company, but I'm going to spend the dividend in my company to go off and do something else that's good for the community. So there's always a tug, there's always a tension in what to do and what is the right thing to do for your company. So what are some of the benefits of ethical business practices? Well, it's amazing how these things apply, how they're really true in a small business operation. Improve financial performance, increase customer loyalty, better sales because you got increased customer loyalty, better recruitment. I'm able to hire more talented employees. I have an improved access to capital. My banker trusts me. I have fewer regulatory inspections and less paperwork to deal with. I have improved productivity and quality. I have an enhanced brand image because all of these things project the image of my company to the public. Who is my company? Well, all of these characteristics project the answer to that question to my customers and to the public. So let's think about the age of the internet, because that's really what we're into now, and integrity is an issue here as well. The buying and selling risk on the internet. I do a lot of shopping and buying and selling on the internet, and this is always an issue for me. How do we ensure that we're preserving that kind of a sanctity? The maintenance of personal property. Cookies are a big issue right now. What people are trying to monitor in terms of consumer behavior. Monitoring employees' emails, internet access, that's a big issue in a lot of companies. I don't have a good pat answer for that. If I'm running a small company, then I probably would do a sampling or a monitoring of employees' emails and internet access. Because there's certain things that I would not allow, I will not allow in a company environment. The protection of intellectual property rights, a big issue on the internet right now. It's real easy to violate intellectual property rights on the internet. IP is a major issue, and so it behooves us, if we're going to operate with integrity and with honesty, then to honor the requirements in the law regarding intellectual property on the internet. In international business and integrity, human rights and abuse of workers is a big issue in our world today. We have to really, if I'm running a larger company and I'm operating components of my company overseas, I want to ensure that I'm treating all of my employees, not just the employees here, but all of my employees fairly and treating them with respect. When it comes to human rights and the abuse of workers, we have to think about outsourcing in the cheap labor market. Sure, I can get a cheaper price for my product, but how are the people who's doing the actual work being treated? Now, there's a lot of stories I can tell you about how people have treated their employees and how it's important and to reflect to the world how we treat our employees and the respect we show for them. Even though sometimes you think, hey, I'm just spending too much money, all of these things are piling up here, I can't afford this. But if we treat our employees with respect and we treat our employees correctly, then all of the other stuff will have a tendency to take care of itself, because one thing that happens immediately is your employees start making better contributions. The author here defines a couple of points here: ethical imperialism, the belief that the ethical standards of one's own country are superior and can be applied universally. I tend to kind of agree with that approach. That is ethical imperialism, but I don't see it as a wrong necessarily. Ethical relativism is the belief that ethical standards are subject to local interpretation. When in Rome, do as Romans do. You got to be very careful there. There are U.S. laws on the book and can get you into a lot of trouble if you're operating overseas in a manner that is normal or accepted in that overseas culture. You can get yourself thrown into jail in the U.S. by disobeying U.S. laws that are on the book for that. So what are the foundations of integrity? You want to build your business with integrity. So the foundations, they're the unarticulated, the underlying values are the unarticulated ethical beliefs that provide a foundation for ethical behavior in a firm. They're based on the personal views of the universe and mankind. The strongly held views can lead to tough choices. They generally always do. Ethics of the firm affect how outsiders view the firm and their decisions about the firm shape. Let's look at that third bullet just for a little bit. If you have a firm that is pursuing unethical practices, or if you have a firm that insists on integrity and openness and honesty in your transactions and with your people, that's going to be reflected to the outside world. And so you have to think about that as you start your company, as you operate your company. I want my ethics to be reflected to the outside world, because they will be. Whatever your ethics are, they're going to be reflected through your company and to the outside world. So you want to make sure you got those right before you go launching off into business. Well, if you're going to shape a company that has or practices integrity and ethics, then the owners are going to have to practice it. In other words, you as an owner have to set the example so that your employees follow that example. Not only is policy important, but your own behavior and your own actions are important. I can tick off major company CEOs. Some of them I wouldn't even want to be in the same room with. Others I would just lift up as real great examples of the type of ethical people that you can be and be successful in business. So here's the ethical decision-making process. 1, you define the problem. Number 2, you identify alternative solutions to the problem. Number 3, you evaluate the identified alternatives. And when you evaluate your alternatives, this is where your integrity and your ethics kind of kick in. What's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable for our company. Those go into this decision-making process. You make the decision, you implement the decision, you evaluate the decision. So this is kind of the typical standard flow chart for making a decision. Now let's look at sustainable small business, environmentalism just for a little bit. This very first bullet gives you a definition for what is a sustainable small business. It's a profitable company that responds to customers' needs while showing reasonable concern for the environment. Well, what is environmentalism then? It's the effort to protect and preserve the environment. It can result in regulations that adversely affect some small firms and create opportunities for others. It promotes win-win, eco-friendly business practices that reduce costs and save energy. So what are we saying here? Well, sustainability is an elusive definition sometimes. So here's a good little definition. A sustainable small business is one that's profitable and it responds to customers' needs while showing reasonable concern for the environment. Let's underline reasonable. And there's a tension now between those who are environmental extremists and those who don't want anything to do with the environment. So we have to somehow or another get to the middle where we are environmentally conscious and we make an effort to try to protect the environment as much as we can while operating our companies.